Okay, class, this video is going to be a little bit more of an explanation on the Chapter 6 questions of questions 2 through 4. So, I want to start off by saying here we have that particular graph that we talk about. We have the marginal cost curve, we have the average total cost curve, and the average variable cost curve. And I added this marginal revenue curve that we're actually going to move as we go through this presentation or through this video. And another thing is I wanted to put over here that we have a little bit of a cheat sheet. I say that profit maximization, we know that that should occur, or a profit maximizing firm should produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We have the break-even point, and the break-even point is where margin or average total cost is going to equal marginal revenue. And then we're going to explain how that also is the same place where average total cost equals marginal cost. And then we have the shutdown point where average variable cost equals marginal revenue, or average variable cost equals marginal cost. So let's go ahead and start explaining this. So it doesn't really matter where that marginal revenue curve is at. It might be up here, or it could be down here. We are always going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that particular point of where marginal revenue equals marginal cost is the quantity that we're going to produce. So let's say that marginal revenue curve is right here. Then we are going to produce at that quantity wherever it comes out, because that's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, the reason we always produce our marginal revenue equals marginal cost is because marginal revenue is the revenue off of producing one more unit of output. The marginal cost is the cost of producing that one more unit of output. If the amount that we have coming in is equal to the amount that we have going out, then we're in equilibrium. If the marginal revenue was greater than the marginal cost, then that would tell us as producers that we can increase production and make a higher profit. If marginal revenue was less than marginal cost, then that means that we need to decrease production, because if we if we continue where we're at, it's going to cost us more to make that additional unit than what we have coming in. So we always produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So as we move up and down this line, we can see that the quantity that we produce is going to change as well. At this point, if marginal revenue is equal to this particular point, we see that we're going to produce at this quantity. But if marginal revenue falls, let's say it goes down to about this point right here. If that marginal revenue were to fall, then the quantity that we now produce falls with it, because we're always going to produce at the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So, that being said, let's start looking at, well, where does the break-even point occur? We know that the break-even point is going to occur where the average total cost equals marginal revenue. So, or we can say down here it's average total cost equals marginal cost. How is that the break-even point? Well, it's the break-even point by saying, well, first and foremost, that marginal revenue is that price that we receive, or that amount that we receive from producing one more unit. That's also equal to the price in perfect competition. Because we are dealing with perfect competition, we are price takers, meaning that this marginal revenue curve is then equal to the price and is also equal to the average revenue curve. So just know that this marginal revenue curve in perfect competition is equal to the price. Well, what if the price falls all the way to this point where this average revenue, or this price, is equal to the average total cost, which means the cost of producing one unit on average, or the cost of producing every unit, is now equal to the price. Well, that means that you basically have just the same amount coming in as you would that you're making it. So you're barely breaking even. You're making just enough money to cover all of your costs. You're not making a profit. You're not losing money. You're breaking even. Now, we know that average total cost equals marginal revenue. But we can also say that average total cost equals marginal cost simply because, well, that's that point where if you always have to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, then you just follow that marginal cost curve, and it's at that point where marginal revenue would equal average total cost, and we can also see that at that same point marginal cost equals average total cost. So your break-even point, the point where you are covering all of your costs, but you're not making any more money, but you're not losing any money. You're not making a profit, you're not losing money. That's that break-even point, and that's going to occur where that marginal revenue equals marginal cost equals average total cost. It's where all three of those will equal. Or you can break it down and say, well, average total cost equals marginal cost, or average total cost equals marginal revenue or marginal cost. So that's how we find that break-even point. So if we know that that's our break-even point, and that break-even point will occur at a quantity of 100. So just to give you a hint, we're kind of working on question 4 right now while explaining this. So then we ask, well, what is our average total cost at this point? Well, our average total cost would be equal to, not Z, but it's equal to $5. What is our average variable cost? Well, if we go ahead and we draw this line straight down, we're producing at that quantity, we're producing at a quantity of 100, and it's at that point that we know we're producing at a quantity of 100, so we need to figure out, well, what is our average variable cost at a quantity of 100? So we're going to go ahead and draw a line directly across from this point of this intersection. And we know that at the break-even point, our average variable cost will be somewhere, let's say, right around, average variable cost might be $3.25. So we have to figure out our total cost now. Well, if on average it costs us $5 to produce 100 units, how are we going to calculate our total cost if it's costing us $5 per unit and we're producing 100 units? Well, very simply, we just take the quantity times the average price per unit, or that price per unit, or that cost per unit in this case. So our total cost is going to be equal to $5 times 100 units, giving us a grand total of $500 for that total cost. Now we have to find our total variable cost. We've already established that our variable cost is going to be $3 or $3.25, or roughly $3.25. For us to produce 100 units, it's going to cost us in variable cost on average $3.25. So to find our total variable cost, we simply multiply our average variable cost times the quantity. So that's going to be equal to $3.25 times 100 units, giving us a total of $325. So now we need to figure out the profit. Well, how do we calculate profit? What is our total revenue minus our total cost? So if we know that a marginal revenue is equal to the price, and that price is equal to $5, and we take that $5 because that's where it's at the break-even point, we take that $5 times the 100 units, what is our total revenue? Well, it's equal to $500, correct? And what's our total cost? Well, our total cost, we already calculated, is $500. At the break-even point, you make a grand total of $0.00 in profit. And we know that, not $9 in profit, we make $0 in profit. And we know that because the price is equal to the average total cost per unit, meaning we're not making any money off of each unit, but we're not losing any money. At the break-even point, our profit should always and will always be $0. So hopefully that explains the break-even point. Next, I'm going to go ahead and delete these lines. And we're now going to calculate the shutdown point. And the shutdown point occurs where average variable cost equals marginal revenue. So we're going to go ahead and keep dropping this marginal revenue line. until it equals this average variable cost. Well, if you notice, that comes up at the same intersection where marginal cost equals average variable cost. Why? Because you're always going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. You're always producing at that same point. So we can also say that the shutdown point is where average variable cost equals marginal cost. Matter of fact, we don't even need the marginal revenue line to complete this problem, but we're going to go ahead and use it as an example. So, or use it to explain things. So, if this is a shutdown point where average variable cost equals marginal revenue, then we can go ahead and answer all of these questions and what you're going to find in question 3 of your assignment. But before we dive into that, I want to explain a little bit more of why this is the shutdown point. So first and foremost, if this is the shutdown point, the reason this is a shutdown point is because if marginal revenue falls below that shutdown point, then we are no longer covering all of our variable cost. If we are producing here, if we're producing at this shutdown point, then we are covering all of our variable costs. We're covering our hourly labor. We're covering the electricity. We're covering the water, all those variable costs, which means we can at least pay our bills on all of those variable costs. But if we, in any point between this break-even point and the shutdown point, if we are producing, say, right here, our marginal revenue is equal to there, we're going to continue to produce in the short run because we are still covering all of our variable costs, and we're also covering some of our fixed costs. So why are the fixed costs important? Well, fixed costs are important because you're going to have to pay those costs regardless of where you're at in production. You're always going to have to pay those fixed costs. So if you are producing and you're covering all your variable costs and some of your fixed costs, in the short run, you're going to continue to produce. You might be losing money. You might be turning a negative amount, but it's better than shutting down altogether, because if you're shutting down altogether, you're paying all of your fixed costs, and you're still paying all of your fixed costs, but if you're producing at this level, some of your fixed costs are being covered by that marginal revenue. But if you ever hit that point where you're not even covering all of your variable costs, you need to shut down, because now you're paying all of your fixed costs and then some of your variable costs as well. And that's when you need to shut down. That's your shutdown point. So if this is your shutdown point, if you look at what quantity are we producing? Well, we are producing at the quantity of 75. So we can go ahead and type that in right here. We're producing 75 units. What is our average total cost? Well, if we follow our average total cost curve up, or we follow this line all the way up, this dotted line, at a quantity of 75 units, our average total cost is actually still $5. So the average total cost is $5. What's our average variable cost? Well, we follow this line up. Oh, look, it's equal to our marginal revenue line, and that's going to be equal at $3. So we now know our average variable cost. What is our total cost? Total cost is going to be this average total cost times the quantity. So we say it's equal to 5 times 75. And I'm going to do some quick math real quick. And that value should be equal to $375. That's your total cost. What's your total variable cost? Well, it's equal to the average variable cost of $3 times 75 units. That's going to be equal to $225. So what's our profit in this example? Well, what is our price per unit? How much are we receiving per unit? Well, that's equal to our marginal revenue curve. So our marginal revenue is at $3 in this example. So $3 times the quantity is equal to $225. So if we're making $225, that's how much revenue we're drawing in. What is our total cost? our total cost is equal to this $375. So if this is the case, we are actually taking a loss of, should be $150. We are losing $150 in profit. And the reason that this is going on is, well, your price is way down here at $3, but it's costing you $5 on average. You are generating less in revenue. That marginal revenue is less than the average total cost, meaning you're going to lose money. So hopefully this video, I know it's got a little bit long-winded. It's a interesting question. It's a good question to cover, but I hope this helps explain some things. But before I let you go, I want to touch on one more thing, and this pertains to question 2. And we're going to talk about what is the supply curve of a particular firm. I believe question 2 asks, what is the supply curve of this firm? Well, we know something. First and foremost, we know that this is the shutdown point right here, where this marginal revenue equals this marginal cost equals this average variable cost curve. So are we ever going to produce along this line below the average variable cost? No, because that's below the shutdown point. If we're producing down there, if marginal revenue falls to this point, we're not covering any of our fixed costs, and we're not even covering all of our variable costs. It's time to shut down. Because if we shut down, our variable costs go to 0, and the most we're losing is our fixed cost. So, if that's the case, if the marginal revenue falls anywhere below this average variable cost, where the average variable cost equals marginal cost, we shut down. So that means that this firm is actually only going to be producing starting where this average variable cost equals a marginal cost curve. And they're going to produce along this marginal cost curve above the intersection of that average variable cost curve. So where a firm is willing to supply at is that particular line that we just drew. Let's just go ahead and make that line yellow, for example. And I know it's a bit squiggly, sorry about that, but that our supply curve of a firm is going to be the marginal cost curve above the shutdown point, and we've already discussed where that shutdown point is. So hopefully this video clears some things up. If it doesn't, if you have some more questions on this video, if you want me to go dive deeper into a particular topic on this video, please send me an email, let me know, and I'll be happy to dive further into it. Thank y'all, and good luck on this assignment.